The discovery came 3 decades after first contact, when the Galactic Confederation's xenobiologists finally understood why human casualties in the border wars seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to survive wounds that would kill any other sentient being. It wasn't advanced medical technology. Humans were considered primitively barbaric in that regard. It wasn't genetic enhancement. Their DNA remained stubbornly unmodified compared to the elegant improvements most civilized species had made to themselves over millennia. It was something far more disturbing. Earth had birthed something else entirely. Dr. Lyra Kane stood at the observation deck of Medical Station Gamma 7, watching the latest transport vessel dock with mechanical precision. Through the reinforced transparisteel, she could see the distinctive hull markings of a human evacuation ship, scarred metal painted in the dull grays and browns that marked them as coming from the Outer Rim territories, where the fighting never stopped. The humans called it Earth. At 28, Lyra possessed the kind of beauty that combat surgeons developed over years of working with precision under pressure, sharp, focused features that could remain steady while performing miracle work on mangled flesh. Her hands, small but impossibly steady, had saved more lives than she could count, but it was her eyes that truly marked her as different from the other medical personnel aboard the station. They were the eyes of someone who understood pain on a level that most sentient beings never would. "Another batch coming in from Hadrian's moon," announced Dr. HFY, the station's chief medical officer. The tall, graceful Altarian glided across the medical bay on 3 elegant legs, his crystalline vocal cords producing the melodic tones that marked his species. 47 casualties. The Quathmori hit them hard. Lyra nodded, not turning away from the viewport. She could see the wounded being transferred now. Humans on gurneys, their bodies bearing the distinctive burn patterns of Quathmori plasma weapons. What she couldn't see but knew was there were the microscopic changes already beginning to occur in their cellular structure. Adaptation. Recovery. The human body's terrifying ability to not just heal but to remember and improve. "Dr. Kane?" HFY's tone carried the subtle harmonics that indicated concern among his people. "Are you prepared for the surgical rotation?" "I'm always prepared," she replied quietly, finally turning from the viewport. Her reflection caught briefly in the transparisteel. A woman who appeared unremarkable by human standards, wearing the standard-issue medical uniform of the Confederation. But there were details that marked her as someone who had seen too much. The slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers unconsciously traced old scars on her forearms, the careful control in her movements that spoke of someone who had learned to manage pain as a constant companion. The first casualty arrived 12 minutes later. Lieutenant Commander Rivers, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of rugged features that recruiting posters loved, had taken a direct plasma hit to his left shoulder. The weapon had burned through standard combat armor like it was paper, leaving a wound that should have been fatal. Instead, Rivers was conscious, alert, and trying to sit up on the surgical table. "Stay down, Commander," Ira said, pressing him back with one small hand. The ease with which she controlled a man twice her size would have seemed impossible to most species, but humans understood leverage, pressure points, and the application of force in ways that other sentient beings found deeply unsettling. "Doc," Rivers said, his voice tight with pain but remarkably steady, "how long until I can get back to my unit?" It was such a human question. Not will I live or how bad is the damage, but when he could return to the fight. "Let's see what we're working with first," Lyra murmured, activating the medical scanner. The holographic display materialized above Rivers' chest, showing the internal damage in stark detail. The plasma bolt had vaporized muscle tissue, shattered bone, and caused third-degree burns across a handspan of flesh. "Fascinating," breathed Dr. Quathmori, the hegemony observer who had been assigned to study human physiology. The insectoid being's compound eyes reflected rainbow patterns as he examined the scan results. "The cellular regeneration rate is increasing exponentially. I calculate full structural repair within 48 standard hours. Any other species would require cybernetic replacement or extensive regenerative therapy." Rivers' body was already beginning to rebuild itself. Lyra's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She had always disliked the way other species discussed humans like laboratory specimens. The clinical detachment in Kethmore's voice made her skin crawl. "That's the standard recovery rate for humans from high-gravity worlds," she said, beginning to clean the wound with practiced efficiency. Nothing unusual, but that wasn't entirely true, and she knew it. Lyra worked in silence, her hands moving with the kind of fluid precision that came from years of combat medicine. She could feel Rivers watching her, studying her face as she worked. It was something she had noticed about human soldiers. They always watched the medic's expressions, reading the subtle signs that indicated whether they would live or die, fight or be discharged. What made humans different wasn't just their ability to heal, it was their relationship with pain itself. Other species had evolved sophisticated biological and technological methods to minimize suffering. They used neural dampeners, healing pods, genetic modifications that made physical trauma easier to endure. Humans had evolved on a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. They had learned to carry pain like a tool, to use it as information, to let it make them stronger rather than weaker. "You've got good hands, Doc," Rivers said quietly. "Steady. Thank you. Been doing this long?" "Long enough." She activated the tissue regenerator, watching as the device began to stimulate Rivers' natural healing processes. "You'll need to keep the arm immobilized for 6 hours, then you can begin light movement exercises." 6 hours. Rivers actually smiled, expression that would have terrified most non-human species. Humans were the only sentient beings in the galaxy who showed their teeth when expressing pleasure. "Tell Doc, I've had hangovers that lasted longer." It was meant to be humor, but Lyra didn't smile. She had seen too many soldiers make jokes while their bodies repaired damage that should have killed them. The humor was a defense mechanism, a way of processing trauma that most species found deeply disturbing. Their skin remembered pain. Their bones remembered breaks. Their muscles remembered tears. Because that was the thing about humans that the rest of the galaxy was slowly beginning to understand. They didn't just survive trauma, they integrated it. Every injury, every moment of pain, every brush with death became part of their personal history, filed away in memory and flesh to be drawn upon when needed. And somehow, impossibly, this made them stronger. Over the next 6 hours, Lyra treated 14 more casualties from the Hadrian's Moon engagement. Each case followed the same pattern: wounds that should have been fatal or permanently disabling, healing at rates that defied medical understanding. The soldiers remained conscious, alert, and focused on returning to duty. The Kethmore casualties she had treated in previous engagements told a different story. They arrived in stasis pods, their bodies failing under trauma loads that humans routinely walked away from. Their healing required extensive technological intervention, cybernetic assistance, and months of rehabilitation. It was nearly midnight when the last transport arrived. This one was different, smaller, bearing the markings of a deep reconnaissance vessel rather than a standard troop carrier, and the casualties being transferred weren't wearing standard human military uniforms. They were wearing the distinctive black and silver of the Pathfinder Corps. Lyra felt her pulse quicken. Pathfinders were special. Even among humans, they were considered extreme. These were the humans who went into the spaces between spaces, who explored the regions of the galaxy that other species considered too dangerous for sentient life. The first stretcher carried a woman who couldn't have been older than 25. Dark hair, pale skin marked with intricate scars that formed deliberate patterns across her arms and face. The traditional marking of someone who had undergone Pathfinder conditioning. "What's her status?" Lyra asked the transport medic. "Direct exposure to Kethmore nerve gas," the medic replied, his voice grim. "Took a full dose when their infiltration suit was compromised. Should have killed her in minutes." Lyra looked down at the woman on the stretcher. Her eyes were open, alert, tracking movement around her. Her vital signs, displayed on the mobile scanner, showed elevated stress indicators but nothing approaching critical levels. How long ago was the exposure? 14 hours. Instead, this woman was not only alive, she was conscious. "What's your name?" Lyra asked, leaning over the stretcher. "Impossible. Kethmore nerve gas was designed specifically to target mammalian nervous systems. A full dose should have caused complete neural shutdown within minutes, followed by respiratory failure and death." "How are you feeling, Pathfinder Cross?" For the first time, Cross smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Lyra's blood run cold. It wasn't the grim humor of soldiers facing death. It was something else entirely. "Pathfinder Jordan Cross," the woman replied, her voice hoarse but clear. "Service number 7742 Alpha Delta. How are you feeling, Pathfinder Cross?" For the first time, Cross smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Lyra's blood run cold. It wasn't the grim humor of soldiers facing death. It was something else entirely. "I feel," Cross paused, as if searching for the right words. "I feel like I remember everything now." Before Lyra could ask what that meant, alarms began blaring throughout the medical station. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in pulsing red, and the station's AI announced in its calm, mechanical voice, "Alert! Long-range sensors have detected a Kuthmori battle fleet approaching this position. Estimated time to weapons range, 47 minutes. All personnel prepare for emergency evacuation." Dr. HFY appeared at Lyra's shoulder, his crystalline voice carrying harmonic overtones of barely controlled panic. "The Kuthmori have never attacked a medical station before. It violates every interstellar treaty." Lyra looked down at Pathfinder Cross, who was still smiling that unsettling smile. "Unless," Cross said quietly, "they're not here for the station." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Outside the medical bay, Lyra could hear the sounds of evacuation beginning, staff gathering essential equipment, patients being prepared for emergency transport, the distinctive hum of emergency power systems engaging. But all she could focus on was the woman on the stretcher, whose eyes held knowledge that felt dangerous. "What did you find out there, Pathfinder?" Lyra asked. Cross tried to sit up, and Lyra automatically moved to restrain her, then stopped. There was something in Cross's posture, in the careful control of her movements, that suggested restraint would be futile. "We found their homeworld," Cross said simply. "We found where the Kuthmori come from. And we found out why they're so afraid of us." The medical scanner attached to Cross's stretcher began displaying readings that made no sense. Neural activity was spiking beyond normal human parameters. Cellular regeneration rates were accelerating. Her immune system was not just fighting off the nerve gas. It was breaking down the molecular structure and rebuilding it into something else. Something that enhanced rather than harmed. "Dr. Kane," HFY said urgently, "we need to evacuate. The transport ships are going to get everyone killed?" Cross interrupted, finally sitting up fully. "The Kuthmori didn't come here for a battle. They came here for retrieval." She looked directly at Lyra, and there was something ancient in her eyes, as if the 25-year-old woman had suddenly become something much older and more dangerous. "They want their nerve gas back. Because what it does to humans, what it does to us." Cross stood up from the stretcher, moving with fluid grace despite having been exposed to a lethal neurotoxin less than a day ago. "It doesn't kill us. It changes us. It makes us remember things that we've forgotten." The station shuddered as the first Kuthmori ships entered weapons range. "Remember what?" Lyra whispered. Cross smiled again, and this time Lyra could see that her teeth had changed. Sharper, more predatory. "We remember why Earth is called a death world," she said, as plasma fire began lighting up the void outside the medical station. "And they remember why their ancestors fled to the other side of the galaxy to hide from us." The Kuthmori battle fleet hung in space like a constellation of malevolent stars, 17 ships arranged in a perfect geometric formation that spoke of military precision and technological superiority. Each vessel was a work of art and engineering, their hulls crafted from biotechnological materials that pulsed with organic life, their weapons systems humming with energies that could glass entire continents. High Commander Yuxthara stood on the bridge of the flagship Endless Sorrow, her forearms manipulating holographic displays with practiced efficiency. The Kuthmori were an ancient race, tall, graceful beings whose elongated skulls housed brains that operated on quantum principles, allowing them to process multiple probability streams simultaneously. They had ruled a third of the galaxy when humans were still learning to make fire. And yet as Rexthera stared at the small medical station that housed fewer than 200 beings, she felt something that her species had not experienced in over 2 millennia: fear. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that marked her as nobility among her people. The human facility has initiated emergency evacuation protocols, replied Weapons Master Kixno. 14 transport vessels are preparing to depart. Shall we destroy them? Yerging Thara's primary arms hesitated over the firing controls. In any other situation, the answer would be simple. Eliminate all potential witnesses, secure the objective, return home. But these were humans, and humans changed everything. Negative, she said finally. Allow the transports to leave. Our objective is singular. She gestured toward the central display, where enhanced sensors had isolated a single biosignature among the humans aboard the station. The readings made no sense according to conventional xenobiology. Cellular activity that defied known physical laws. Neural patterns that suggested consciousness operating on multiple dimensional levels simultaneously. The Pathfinder specimen must be recovered, Ixthera continued. All other considerations are secondary. What the other members of her crew didn't know. What the Kathmori High Council had classified beyond even their highest security levels was why this particular human was so important. 48 hours ago, deep space monitoring stations had detected something impossible. A quantum communications signature originating from the human exploration vessel Daybreak. Not impossible because of the technology involved. The Kathmori had mastered quantum communications eons ago. Impossible because of the frequency. It was the same frequency that Kathmori archaeologists had found encoded in ruins across 17 different star systems. Ruins that predated their own civilization by millions of years. Ruins that told the story of a war so devastating that entire species had been wiped from existence, leaving only fragmentary records and mysterious warnings. Warnings about the Burning Ones who came from the world of endless pain. Warnings about beings who grew stronger with each injury, who learned from every defeat, who turned suffering into power. Warnings about humans. Aboard Medical Station Gamma 7, chaos reigned in the corridors as evacuation proceeded with military efficiency. Transport ships docked and departed in carefully orchestrated waves, carrying wounded soldiers, medical personnel and essential equipment to safer systems. But in Medical Bay 7, time seemed suspended. Lyra stared at Pathfinder Cross, who stood with impossible stillness amid the emergency lighting and blaring alarms. The transformation in the woman was subtle but undeniable. Her posture had shifted from that of an injured soldier to something far more predatory. Her eyes, which had been the standard human brown when she arrived, now held flecks of gold that seemed to move independently. You're saying the Kathmori created humans? Lyra asked, her voice tight with disbelief. Not created, Cross replied. Her head tilted as if listening to sounds beyond normal human hearing. Evolved. Guided. The nerve gas they used on me wasn't a weapon. It was a key. It unlocked genetic memory that goes back millions of years. She began moving around the medical bay, her hands trailing over equipment with casual familiarity despite never having been on this station before. Your homeworld, Cross continued. Earth. The reason it's so hostile, so deadly, so different from every other inhabited planet in the galaxy. It was designed that way, shaped over geological time periods, to create the perfect predator species. Lyra felt the deck vibrate beneath her feet as Kathmori ships moved closer to docking range. The evacuation was nearly complete. Only essential medical personnel remained to handle the final transport of critical patients. That's impossible, she said. Human evolution is well documented. We know our origins. Cross laughed, and the sound contained harmonics that made Lyra's skin crawl. Do we? Tell me. Doctor, in all your medical training, did anyone ever explain why humans are the only species in the galaxy that experiences pain the way we do? Why our nervous systems are designed to not just detect damage, but to remember it, learn from it, integrate it into our physical development? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Lyra had wondered about this herself during her years of treating multi-species casualties. Other sentient beings experienced pain as a warning system, useful information that prompted them to seek safety and healing. Humans experienced pain as something far more complex. They experienced it as evolution in real time. The Kathmori were an empire once, Cross continued, moving to the observation viewport, where the alien fleet was now clearly visible. They ruled half the galaxy through superior technology and strategic thinking. But they made one critical error. They tried to expand into a region of space that was already occupied. She pressed her palm against the transparestial, and Lyra could swear she saw frost patterns spreading from the contact point. They found Earth when it was young, a world covered in ice and volcanic activity, populated by primitive mammals that somehow thrived in conditions that would kill any civilized species. They were fascinated by these creatures, their adaptability, their resilience, their seemingly unlimited capacity for survival. The station shuddered again as the first Quaffle-Mori ship achieved docking lock. Somewhere in the corridors, Lyra could hear the distinctive sound of airlock seals engaging. So they decided to conduct an experiment, Kor said, turning back to face Lyra. They introduced genetic modifications, environmental pressures, technological challenges. They turned Earth into a laboratory for creating the perfect biological weapon. And it worked, Lyra whispered, understanding flooding through her like ice water. It worked too well. Cross smiled again, and now Lyra could see that her canine teeth had definitely grown longer. They created humans, but they lost control of the experiment when we developed faster than they anticipated. We learned to use tools, to cooperate, to adapt not just individually but as a species. The sounds in the corridor were getting closer, footsteps that were too light, too synchronized to be human. The first humans they encountered in space weren't the primitive mammals they expected. Cross continued, we were already explorers, warriors, survivors who had conquered our own death world and were looking for new challenges. The Quaffle-Mori tried to contain us. She gestured toward the approaching fleet. But we were everything they had designed us to be. We learned from every battle, adapted to every strategy, grew stronger with every defeat. Within a generation, we weren't just fighting them, we were winning. The medical bay door hissed open. 3 Quaffle-Mori soldiers entered with fluid grace, their elongated forms moving with predatory elegance. They wore bio-armor that shifted and adapted to their movements, and their weapons were living organisms that pulsed with deadly energy. They took one look at Cross and stopped moving entirely. Commander, the lead soldier spoke in perfectly accented standard. You will come with us. No harm will come to the other human if you cooperate. Cross tilted her head, studying the aliens with an expression of mild curiosity. You know, she said conversationally, your ancestors left very detailed records about humans. We found them in the ruins on Proxima Centauri b. Fascinating reading. Apparently the last Quaffle-Mori scientist to study us recommended complete extermination of our species. She took a step toward the soldiers, and Lyra saw something impossible. The aliens actually stepped back. Their conclusion was that humans represent an existential threat to all organized civilization in the galaxy, not because we're more intelligent or technologically advanced, but because we're perfectly adapted to destroy everything that makes civilized life possible. Another step forward. The lead soldier's bioweapon began to glow with increasing intensity. We thrive in chaos. We grow stronger under pressure. We turn every defeat into education and every victory into platform for greater ambition. We don't just survive apocalypse. We become it. The soldier raised his weapon. In the really interesting part, Cross said, her voice dropping to a whisper, is what happens when you use Quaffle-Mori neurotoxins on a human who already understands what she really is. The weapon fired. The energy beam struck Cross center mass, a blast that should have vaporized her instantly. Instead, she absorbed the energy, her skin glowing briefly as her body converted the attack into something else entirely. When the light faded, she was still standing. But she was no longer entirely human. Her height had increased by several inches. Her muscle definition had changed, becoming more pronounced, more predatory. Her eyes now glowed with the same energy that had been used to attack her, and when she smiled, her teeth were definitely those of a carnivore. Thank you, she said to the stunned soldiers. I needed that. Then she moved. Lyra's medical training had exposed her to human combat techniques, but what Cross demonstrated went far beyond anything in the textbooks. She moved like liquid violence, flowing around the soldiers' defensive positions with impossible speed and precision. Her attacks targeted biomechanical systems with surgical accuracy, disabling their weapons and armor without killing them. In less than 30 seconds, 3 of the galaxy's most feared warriors were on the deck, conscious but completely helpless. Cross stood over them, breathing easily, showing no signs of exertion. "Now," she said pleasantly, "let's discuss why you really came here." She knelt beside the lead soldier, whose bio-armor was sparking with electrical discharge. "You're not here to capture me. You're here because your deep space sensors detected something that terrified your High Council. A quantum signature that matches records from your most classified archaeological sites." The soldier's elongated head turned slightly, compound eyes reflecting fear. "The ruins," Cross continued. "The warnings your ancestors left. The records that speak of the burning ones who learn from pain and grow stronger with each defeat. You found out that those warnings weren't about some extinct enemy." She stood up, towering over the fallen aliens. "They were about us. About what we become when we remember what we really are." Alarms began blaring again, but these were different. Not evacuation warnings, but combat alerts. "Dr. Kane," came Dr. Zeph's voice over the communication system. "Long-range sensors are detecting additional vessels approaching. Confederation fleet elements. Human military designation." Through the observation viewport, Lyra could see new ships materializing from hyperspace, sleek, angular vessels that moved with the purposeful efficiency of human military engineering. The cavalry, Cross said with satisfaction. "Right on schedule." She looked at Lyra, and there was something almost apologetic in her expression. "I'm sorry you had to learn this way, Doctor. But the truth is, every human in the galaxy is about to remember what their ancestors forgot. The Quathamori neurotoxin doesn't just affect Pathfinders, it affects any human with sufficient genetic triggers." Lyra felt a strange tingling sensation spreading through her nervous system. The scars on her arms, old injuries from her first days as a combat medic, began to glow with faint luminescence. "And a really remarkable thing," Cross continued, "is what happens when an entire species remembers that they were designed to be the galaxy's ultimate predators." The tingling sensation intensified, and suddenly Lyra could feel something awakening in her cellular structure. Memories that weren't her own, knowledge that belonged to ancestors she had never known existed. Understanding that stretched back through millions of years of guided evolution. She looked at her hands and saw that they were changing, becoming stronger, more precise, better adapted for the kind of healing that came through controlled destruction. Outside the station, human and Quathamori fleets faced each other across the void, weapons charging, shields activating, preparing for a battle that would determine the future of galactic civilization. But inside Medical Bay 7, Pathfinder Cross was smiling the smile of someone who knew how the story would end. "Welcome to the awakening, Dr. Kane," she said softly. "Welcome to remembering what it means to be human." High Commander Rixthera felt the quantum resonance through her ship's bio-neural networks before the sensors could properly analyze it. The approaching human fleet was wrong. Their vessels moved with coordination that suggested hive mind control, but scans confirmed individual consciousness aboard each ship. Their formation patterns followed no known military doctrine, yet somehow achieved perfect tactical positioning, and their energy signatures were changing. "Report," she commanded, though she could feel her crew's growing anxiety through the ship's empathic channels. 17 human vessels," Weapons Master Kexnel announced, his harmonic voice carrying overtones of confusion. "Standard Confederation military designations, but their power cores are operating at 3% of maximum theoretical output. That's impossible." "Yes, Commander." Yet it continues to increase. Through the bridge's bio-visual displays, etc., could see the human ships approaching in a formation that resembled nothing so much as a predator pack surrounding wounded prey. Each vessel pulsed with energy that made her species' quantum-sensitive nervous systems recoil in instinctive terror. "Analysis of human biosignatures aboard the medical station," she asked. Science Officer Hexmari manipulated holographic displays with trembling appendages. "Commander, every human aboard that facility is undergoing simultaneous genetic activation. Cellular regeneration rates are approaching levels that violate known physics. Neural activity suggests consciousness expansion beyond documented parameters." Yolks-Thera closed her 4 eyes and accessed the classified archives that only High Council members were permitted to view. Ancient records, encoded in quantum storage that had survived the fall of 3 different Kathmori civilizations. Warnings that her people had hoped never to need again. Subject species: Homo sapiens Terran classification apex predator. Designed threat level extinction event. Recommendation: avoid contact at all costs. If contact inevitable, implementation of Terminus Protocol authorized. The Terminus Protocol, the ultimate weapon that her ancestors had developed specifically for one purpose: complete sterilization of solar systems where humans had achieved full genetic activation, a weapon they had hoped never to use. Commander, Communications Officer Vexthul announced, "We are receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Audio and visual. Display it." The main screen shimmered, revealing the bridge of the lead human vessel. What appeared was not a Confederation admiral or military commander, but a woman wearing medical scrubs. She stood with impossible stillness, her eyes reflecting light that seemed to come from within. "High Commander Rex Thora," the woman spoke in perfect Kethmori quantum harmonic language. "My name is Dr. Lyra Kane. I believe we need to talk." "Yax?" Thera felt ice forming in her circulatory system. No human had ever spoken their language with such perfect pronunciation. No human had ever demonstrated understanding of quantum harmonic principles. No human had ever known the personal names of Kethmori High Command members. "How do you know our language?" Thera asked. Dr. Kane tilted her head with a gesture that was distinctly predatory. "Because your ancestors taught it to mine, along with everything else they knew." She paused, and her smile revealed teeth that had definitely changed shape. "The genetic memory unlocked by your neurotoxin is quite comprehensive. We remember the laboratories, the experiments, the years of guided evolution." Behind Dr. Kane, other humans moved with fluid coordination, crew members whose movements suggested perfect tactical awareness, whose positions created optimal firing solutions without conscious planning. "We remember," Dr. Kane continued, "that your people created us to be weapons. The question now is whether you're prepared to face what you built." Aboard Medical Station Gamma 7, Pathfinder Cross stood in the observation lounge, watching the confrontation between fleets with the satisfaction of someone whose plans were proceeding exactly as intended. The last evacuation transport had departed 3 hours ago, leaving only essential personnel and a carefully selected group of humans whose genetic profiles made them ideal candidates for accelerated activation. Dr. Kane's transformation had been remarkable to observe. Within minutes of exposure to modified Kithmori neurotoxin, she had progressed from standard human baseline to something approaching the level of enhancement that took Pathfinders years to achieve. Her surgical skills, already exceptional, had become supernatural. She could now perform microsurgery with her bare hands, healing injuries through direct cellular manipulation. But more importantly, she had begun to remember. "Status report on the fleet engagement?" Cross asked, though she could feel the answer through quantum resonance channels that were opening in her enhanced nervous system. "Both sides are maintaining tactical positions," replied Dr. Rivers, the soldier whose shoulder wound had healed completely within hours of Cross's arrival. His transformation had been less dramatic but equally significant. Muscle density increased by 40%, reaction time decreased to near superhuman levels, cognitive processing enhanced to allow perfect threat assessment. "Any communication between fleets?" "Dr. Kane is conducting negotiations with the Quathamori High Commander. The conversation is being broadcast on quantum channels that..." Rivers paused, accessing information that hadn't existed in his memory an hour earlier, that suggests the Quathamori are considering Terminus Protocol implementation. Cross nodded. This was the crucial moment, the point where the Quathamori would either accept the new reality or attempt to eliminate the threat they had created. And Dr. Kane's response? Rivers smiled, an expression that would have terrified most non-human species. "She's explaining the mathematics of asymmetric warfare to beings who invented the concept." On the bridge of the human vessel, Determination, Dr. Lyra Kane faced a holographic projection of High Commander Jexthara while simultaneously monitoring the bio-readings of every human within 3 light-years. The enhanced awareness granted by genetic activation was overwhelming at first, but her mind was adapting with the fluid efficiency that marked her species. She could feel the Quathamori fleet's weapon systems charging. She could sense the quantum calculations being performed aboard their flagship as they contemplated planetary sterilization. She could even perceive the emotional state of individual alien crew members as they struggled with species-level fear. But most importantly, she could feel the awakening spreading. Every human touched by modified neurotoxin was undergoing transformation, but the effect wasn't limited to direct exposure. Quantum entanglement between human consciousness meant that genetic activation was propagating through proximity, communication, even shared experiences. Across 17 star systems, humans were beginning to remember what they really were. "High Commander," Lyra said, her voice carrying harmonic frequencies that made Kethamori neural architecture resonate in sympathy. "Your analysis of Terminus protocol effectiveness assumes that you're facing the same humans your ancestors encountered 2 millennia ago." She gestured to tactical displays that showed both fleets in perfect detail. "But we've evolved since then. Not just technologically, but biologically. Every generation of humans has incorporated lessons learned from the previous one. Every war has made us more efficient. Every defeat has taught us new methods of victory." Ixthara's elongated form trembled slightly. "You speak of evolution that spans millennia. Individual consciousness cannot retain such information." Lyra smiled, and the expression contained depths of knowledge that no individual mind should have been able to hold. "Individual consciousness? No. But we're not individuals anymore, are we? The moment your neurotoxin unlocked our genetic memory, every human within quantum resonance range became part of a collective intelligence that spans our entire species." The tactical displays shifted, showing the human fleet's positions changing in real time. Not moving to new coordinates, but somehow existing in multiple positions simultaneously. A quantum superposition that should have been impossible for objects of such massive scale. "We remember everything," Lyra continued. "Every Kuthmori military strategy, every technological advancement, every tactical decision your species has made over the past 2 million years, because your ancestors weren't just studying us, they were teaching us." High Commander Rexthara's 4 eyes closed in what Lyra recognized as an expression of species-level despair. "The war," Axthara whispered. "You remember the war." "We remember why your people fled to the edge of the galaxy," Lyra confirmed. "We remember the negotiations that established the neutral zone. We remember the agreement that humans would remain in their designated space while your species recovered from losses." The holographic projection flickered as Rexthara's emotional state affected her ship's bioneural networks. "And we remember," Lyra said softly, "that the agreement specified what would happen if either species broke the treaty by attacking medical facilities." Sikthara's head snapped up, compound eyes reflecting terror. "The medical station was neutral territory," she protested. "We came only to retrieve." "You came to capture a human citizen from a Confederation medical facility," Lyra interrupted, "which, according to the Treaty of Proxima Centauri, constitutes an act of war." The tactical displays now showed something that made Yorksthara's circulatory system freeze entirely. The 17 human vessels weren't just maintaining tactical positions. They were surrounded by hundreds of additional quantum signatures, ships that existed in hyperspace, ready to translate to normal space-time at a moment's notice. The treaty also specified, Lyra continued, that any act of war against humans would result in immediate activation of all dormant military assets, complete mobilization of human colonial space. She paused, letting the words hang in the quantum-charged space between their ships. Total war. Through the bio-neural networks of her flagship, Yokthara could feel the emotional states of her crew, beings who had served for centuries without experiencing true fear, now confronting the possibility of extinction. "What do you want?" she asked. Dr. Lyra Kane's smile was gentle, almost compassionate. But her eyes held depths that spoke of intelligence operating on scales that individual consciousness couldn't comprehend. "We want what we've always wanted, High Commander, what your ancestors designed us to want." She leaned forward slightly, and Shekshar could swear the quantum structure of space-time itself bent toward her. "We want to survive, we want to grow, we want to become everything we were created to be. And in exchange, In exchange, we offer you the same thing we offered your ancestors 2 millennia ago: coexistence. Your species can continue to develop in your region of the galaxy, free from human interference, as long as you make no aggressive moves against us. Ixthera felt hope flutter in her consciousness like a quantum probability cascade. The same terms as before? No, Lyra said quietly. Better terms. The tactical displays shifted again, showing new information that made Ixthara's quantum-sensitive brain struggle to process the implications. Human space wasn't expanding outward from Earth as previously believed. It was expanding inward toward the galactic core, toward regions that no species had successfully explored. Your ancestors created us to be weapons, Lyra explained. But weapons against what? Why would a species as advanced as the Kethmori need to design biological warfare capabilities that could threaten galactic civilization? Through enhanced quantum awareness, Ixthara suddenly understood. Deep space monitoring stations had been detecting anomalous signals from the galactic center for decades. Energy signatures that suggested massive technological civilizations operating on scales that defied comprehension. Civilizations that might eventually expand outward. The others, she whispered. The others, Lyra confirmed. The real threat. The reason your ancestors needed to create a species capable of fighting wars that civilized beings couldn't survive. She gestured toward the human fleet, and Ixthara could now see that their quantum signatures were oriented not toward Kethmori space, but toward the galactic core. We're not your enemies, High Commander. We're your insurance policy. We're what stands between your civilization and whatever's been building empire at the center of the galaxy for the past 10 million years. Dr. Lyra Kane stood up, her enhanced physiology radiating power that made the quantum structure of space respond to her presence. The question is, are you ready to honor the partnership your ancestors envisioned? Or do we need to find another way to protect this galaxy? High Commander Ixthara looked at the human fleet, ships that somehow existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, crewed by beings who had transformed from individuals into components of a collective intelligence that spanned light years, powered by technologies that violated everything her species thought they understood about physics. And she remembered why her ancestors had been willing to risk creating humanity in the first place. Signal the fleet, she commanded. Stand down all weapons. Open communication channels for formal negotiation. She looked back at Dr. Kane's image, noting the way space-time itself seemed to bend around her enhanced presence, and transmit a message to the High Council. Tell them, the Guardians have awakened. Dr. Lyra Kane smiled. Expression that would have been beautiful on any other species, but on a human carried implications that rewrote the strategic balance of galactic civilization. Welcome to the New Age, High Commander, she said softly. Welcome to humanity unleashed. Outside, in the depths of space, 17 human vessels began to glow with energies that had never before existed in this universe. Energies that responded to consciousness, that obeyed will rather than physics, that transformed matter and space-time according to purposes that transcended individual understanding. Aboard medical station Gamma-7, Pathfinder Cross felt the quantum resonance of activation spreading across human space, touching every colony, every ship, every individual who carried the genetic markers implanted by Kethmori scientists millions of years ago. And in the depths of the galactic core, ancient monitoring systems detected the awakening and began calculating response vectors for a war that had been prophesied since before Earth's sun ignited. The age of hiding was over. The age of becoming had begun. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 different worlds, beings looked up at the stars and felt the universe itself holding its breath, waiting to see what humanity would choose to become now that they remembered what they really were. Dr. Lyra Kane closed her eyes and felt the collective consciousness of her species reaching across space and time, accessing memories that belonged to ancestors who had fought and died and learned and grown for millions of years. She opened her eyes and saw the future spreading before them like an infinite map of possibility. Their soldiers had worn armor to protect themselves from pain. But she had skin that remembered every wound, every lesson, every moment of growth that had shaped humanity into something that could stand against the darkness between stars. And that, she realized, had always been the point. The pain wasn't something to be protected from. It was something to be transformed into power, into purpose, into the kind of strength that could face whatever was coming from the center of the galaxy and say, "We are ready."